Mission Impossible Final Reckoning was supposed to be grand farewell to one of the most iconic action series of the past 30 years. But did Tom Cruise manage to follow up the excellent parts 3 to 6, or is Final Reckoning closer to the dreadful second part? Part 8 basically picks up exactly where Part 7 left off. Ethan and his team have stolen a key from Gabriel, which unlocks the engine room of the Sevastopol submarine, where is hidden the source code of the entity, a rogue AI trying to take over the world. The problem is, Ethan has no idea where the submarine actually wrecked. A large part of the previous installments followed a typical formula. Ethan's team had to overcome complex obstacles or retrieve something in exotic locations, pushing them forward to the next mission. This gave us the great scenes like the fun car chase in Rome in Dead Reckoning, the helicopter duel in Part 6, the Waterworld haste in 5, or the adrenaline-fueled climb up the Burj Khalifa in 4, among many others. In the first half of Final Reckoning, we visit a lot of different places too, which would normally be great, but here it feels more like a downside. We only spent a few minutes in each locations, and instead of solid action, we get a brief fistfights or foot chases, often underground, with nothing visually exciting to watch. Worse yet, much of the time is spent in various offices where characters keep repeating that the entity is the most terrifying enemy they have ever faced, and that it predicts their every move. Yet, just like in Part 7, the entity behaves utterly stupidly, and even helps the protagonist to find the most efficient way to destroy it. Supposedly all-powerful AI that sends out goons with knives instead of machine guns just don't inspire fear. Its appearance, like 20-year-old Hubble telescope image, doesn't help either. Mission Impossible 8 thus confirms that the choosing the villain was a major misstep by Tom Cruise and director Christopher McQuarrie. At least Part 7 had Gabriel, who was actually menacing, but here he is reduced to cartoonish Bond villains from the 80s, thanks to poorly written dialogue. He is nowhere near terrifying Philip Seymour Hoffman from Part 3 or the cunning John Lark played by Henry Cavill in Part 6. What saves Final Reckoning from the total disaster is the second half, where things finally kick in the proper action mode. And we get about 1.5 scenes that remind us why we love the Mission Impossible series so much. The first showcases Fraser Taggart's camera work, with the Russian submarine stretching across the full IMAX screen, a real delight. The second is much hyped biplane chase from the trailers, where you will be left wondering how a 60-year-old guy pulled that off again. I was on the edge of my seat just watching it. For me, it's one of the craziest scenes in the entire franchise. Still, for such an expensive farewell, there really should have been more moments like this. It's a real shame, because the cast is clearly giving it their all. Ving Rhames Luther still oozes charisma. Simon Pegg and Pom Klementieff bring some great comedic moments. Hayley Atwell unfortunately gets less screen time than in Part 7, but she does appear in the two of the funniest scenes in the film. The farewell tone is heavy, with several flashbacks and the return of the characters from previous films, like Erica Sloane from the Part 6 and even William Dunlow from the very first movie. There are few more callbacks that might feel a bit forced, but nothing too bothersome. And then there is Ethan Hunt himself. He's always been capable of insane stunts, usually presented with a bit of movie magic, but still within the bounds of reality. This time the creators, led by Tom Cruise, have completely thrown realism out of the window, turning the main character into the indestructible messiah who can survive situations that would freeze anyone else to death in 10 seconds. Unfortunately for me, Final Reckoning lands in the second to last place in the series, just above the dreadful second part. Maybe I was just too hyped, which makes this my biggest disappointment of the year so far, and I'm not so sure anything will top it. But if you enjoyed the entity storyline in Part 7 and have a higher tolerance for dumb dialogue and excessive flashbacks, there is a good chance that you will enjoy Part 8 a lot more than I did. Still, Ethan deserves a much better send-off than he got. If the series had ended with Part 6, it would have gone out on a high note, but few are that lucky, and now Ethan Hunt can shake hands with Jason Bourne.